Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, and tonight, I invite you to walk with me, not through the loud moments of history, not through the clashing speeches or dramatic scenes that often define political life, but through something quieter, through the steady, deliberate footsteps of a man shaped not by noise, but by silence, discipline, and duty. That I have often been called many things. Silent Cal, the quiet president, the man who rarely spoke unless something needed to be said. But silence is often misunderstood. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is space. Space to think, space to see clearly, space to act with purpose. And throughout my life, from the hills of Vermont to the halls of the White House, it was in silence that I often found direction. In this long reflection, I wish to tell you my story, not as a list of dates or offices or laws, but as the journey of a boy raised in a small wooden house on a dirt road, who grew up believing that honesty mattered, that hard work mattered, and that the fewer words spoken, the truer each one must be. America was changing quickly. When I was young, the world was small, steady, and shaped by the rhythms of the land. By the time I left the presidency, the country hummed with machines, automobiles, electric lights, radios, jazz music, rising skyscrapers, and the restless ambition of a new age. That I stood at the edge of that transformation, not to command it, but to guide it gently, and at times, simply to keep it from tipping too far. In the years ahead, you will hear me speak of joy and hardship, of personal losses that shaped me more than any election, of moral convictions that remained with me even when the world rushed forward with overwhelming speed. You will hear how I confronted moments of national crisis, how I carried responsibilities that I never asked for, and how I tried to serve with restraint rather than force, believing that government should exist to support the people, not to rule their every moment. You will hear about the night when I was awakened by a knock on my father's farmhouse door, the moment I learned that President Warren Harding had died, and that the weight of the presidency had fallen suddenly upon my shoulders. And you will hear how, in the quiet of that Vermont room, lit only by a kerosene lamp, my father placed his hand upon mine and administered the oath of office that changed the course of my life forever. You will also learn about the tragedy that left a mark on my heart far deeper than any burden of politics, the loss of my son, a grief that silenced something inside me that never quite returned. I will speak to you of prosperity and pride, of the roaring 20s, a time of excitement and confidence in the United States, and of my belief that a government that is mindful, frugal, and careful can help a nation thrive without overshadowing the people who make it strong. And finally, I will share with you the reflections of a man who lived long enough to watch America rise toward greatness, face uncertainty, and enter the early shadows of a hardship yet to come. My life was quiet, but it was lived with intention. My words were few, but they were chosen carefully. And as we begin this long journey together, I invite you to listen, not just to the things I say, but to the spaces between them where the true weight of a life is often found. Now, let me begin my story from the beginning, in a small Vermont village called Plymouth Notch, where the world was simple, the nights were clear, and the values that guided my entire life first took root. I was born on the 4th of July, 1872, in a small village nestled among the rolling hills of Plymouth Notch, Vermont. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see the way the morning fog rested gently on the fields, the way the sunlight crept slowly over the wooden rooftops, warming the chill of dawn. Mine was not a world of noise or rush. It was a world of stillness, of long winters, quiet roads, and honest work. A place where every person knew every other, where each handshake carried meaning, and where a man's reputation traveled farther than his voice. My father, John Coolidge, embodied the values of that land. He was a farmer, a storekeeper, a justice of the peace, and a man whose word was as steady as the Vermont earth. He spoke plainly, acted firmly, and lived by principles that needed no decoration. From him, I learned that responsibility is not something a man seeks. It is something he accepts because it must be done. I watched him work from dawn until night, never complaining, never expecting reward beyond the satisfaction of doing the right thing. My mother, Victoria, had a different kind of strength. There was gentleness in her hands, in her smile, in the quiet way she moved through our home. She read to me, encouraged my curiosity, and taught me that kindness could be as powerful as discipline. But her health was delicate, and when I was only 12, illness took her from us. Her absence left a silence inside me, one deeper than the quiet of the Vermont hills. It was a silence I carried for the rest of my life. Life in Plymouth Notch was simple, but in that simplicity, lessons were everywhere. I learned to split wood, to tend livestock, to help in the store, to respect the rhythm of seasons. The winters were harsh. Snow piled high against the doors, the wind pressed against the windows, and the world outside seemed to disappear. But inside our home there was warmth, and inside the people of Vermont there was a resilience forged by long seasons and hard work. When my younger sister died in infancy, and later when my brother passed away, I felt the weight of loss before I understood its meaning. These experiences did not make me bitter. They carved quiet spaces inside me, spaces that taught me to observe more than I spoke, to feel more than I showed. People later asked why I was so silent. But silence was not something I adopted. It was something life taught me. School in our little town was modest. The classrooms were cold in the winter and warm in the summer, and the lessons were often interrupted by chores that needed doing at home. But I loved to read. Books carried me beyond the hills of Vermont, into worlds of philosophy, history, law, and the workings of human nature. I found in them a kind of companionship that I rarely sought from people. My father, recognizing that education would shape my future more than the fields ever could, encouraged me to pursue my studies. He did not speak about ambition. Instead, he spoke about preparation, that a man must sharpen his mind the way he sharpens his tools. By the time I was a young man, I felt a pull beyond Plymouth Notch. I loved my home, its quiet roads, its familiar faces, the simplicity of life there. But I sensed that my path led outward, shaped by the values I learned, but destined to be tested far from the hills of Vermont. That is how I came to leave for Amherst College. It was not a dramatic departure, no grand farewells, no bold announcements. I simply packed my things, shook my father's hand, and stepped onto the road. But as I walked away from the village, I remember looking back once more. The sun was rising over the hills, touching the rooftops with the same gentle light I had known since childhood. And in that moment, I felt something I would feel many times throughout my life. A quiet certainty that the world ahead would challenge me, but the values of my home would guide me. Leaving the quiet hills of Vermont for Amherst College was, in many ways, the first great turning point of my life. Plymouth Notch had shaped my character, my habits, my understanding of work and duty. But Amherst shaped my mind. It opened doors to ideas and philosophies that I had never encountered, and it forced me to measure myself not against the neighbors I had known since childhood, but against the wider world of thought, ability, and ambition. When I first arrived at Amherst, I felt out of place. Many of the young men there came from families with resources far beyond anything I had known. Their clothes were finer, their voices louder, and their confidence seemed effortless. On the other hand, carried with me the reserve of a farm boy from Vermont. I had a modest wardrobe, a quiet manner, and a habit of observing more than speaking. But what I lacked in outward confidence, I made up for in determination. I knew that I had come to Amherst not to impress others, but to learn, to stretch my understanding and prepare myself for a life of responsibility. One of the most profound influences on my education was Professor Charles Garman, a man whose teachings reached deeper than mere academics. He challenged us to consider the moral dimensions of life, to think about duty, justice, and the role of conscience. His classroom was not about memorizing facts. It was about confronting the questions that shape a man's character. He would ask, again and again, what is the right thing? It was a simple question, but its simplicity made it all the more demanding. Garman's lessons never left me. His insistence on moral clarity shaped the way I viewed every position I would later hold: city councilman, mayor, governor, and eventually president. Whenever I hesitated, whenever politics or pressure clouded judgment, I returned to that question: what is the right thing? Life at Amherst was not only about study. It was also about learning to navigate a world larger and more complex than the one I had known. I joined clubs and organizations, though rarely the loudest or most celebrated ones. I preferred the debate societies, where ideas mattered more than personality, And where a quiet student could excel by thinking clearly rather than speaking extravagantly, I found that I could express my thoughts more fully in writing than in conversation. Writing allowed me the space to choose each word with care, without the noise or rush of a crowd. I contributed essays, editorials, and reflections wherever I could, discovering that the written word could be as powerful, sometimes more powerful, than speech. During my years at Amherst, money was often tight. I took odd jobs, lived modestly, and learned to make do with little. But I never considered myself deprived. The scarcity taught me discipline, an appreciation for economy and careful management that would become central to my philosophy in public life. A government, I would later say, must live within its means just as a family does. That principle, which some saw as political doctrine, was for me simply common sense learned from necessity. As I moved through the years of study, something inside me began to shift. I still spoke little, but I listened with greater purpose. I watched the way others debated, the way they reasoned, the way they carried themselves. Slowly, I came to understand that leadership was not always loud. A leader could be steady, thoughtful, deliberate, someone whose strength came not from dominating a room, but from grounding it up. By the time I graduated, I was not the same young man who had arrived. The world still felt large, but it no longer felt overwhelming. I understood that my silence was not a weakness, but a method, a way to process, to reflect, to ensure that when I did speak, it was with intention rather than impulsiveness. After Amherst, I returned briefly to Vermont, carrying with me not only what I had learned, but also a newfound sense of direction. I did not yet know precisely where my path would lead, but I understood that I was meant to serve in some capacity. The lessons of my youth, the teachings of my professors, and the quiet determination that had been with me since childhood were aligning toward a calling greater than the life I had known. It was then that I chose the law. Not because I longed for argument or courtroom drama, I did not, but because the law represented structure, order, justice, and clarity. It demanded fairness, it demanded discipline, and it demanded a respect for truth that matched the values I carried from home. Leaving Amherst, I stepped into that next chapter prepared, not loud, not bold, but ready. My voice might have been quiet, but my purpose had begun to take shape. I was a quiet man long before I ever became President of the United States. Some people later called me Silent Cal, and perhaps they were right. But silence, in my life, was never emptiness. It was observation. It was listening. It was the careful study of a world that changed faster than most men were ready for. And now, as I look back across the years of my life, I want to take you with me, slowly, steadily, through the path that shaped me, tested me, and eventually placed the weight of a nation upon my shoulders. I was born in the green hills of Vermont, in a small village most Americans had never heard of, and perhaps still haven't. My childhood was simple, shaped by the rhythms of nature and the steady discipline of farm life. It was a life without noise, without crowds, without the rush of the modern age. But it taught me something that would guide me for the rest of my days, that a man's character is formed in the quiet, long before the world ever decides to judge him. As I grew, I learned to value duty, restraint, and the belief that government should not suffocate the individual spirit. These ideas did not arrive in a moment. They settled into me gradually, day by day, as I watched my father serve our community with humility and fairness. I understood early that leadership was not a performance. It was responsibility. In time, that responsibility led me far from the small wooden house in Plymouth Notch. It led me into law, into public service, and eventually into the turbulent currents of American politics during an era of extraordinary change. I never sought the spotlight, yet somehow it found me. And on one quiet August night, in the flickering glow of a kerosene lamp, my life changed in a way I could never have predicted. The oath of the presidency was administered by my own father, and with it came challenges that would test not only my strength, but the very confidence of a nation recovering from war and stepping boldly into modern prosperity. Tonight, I will guide you through that journey, my journey, from the stillness of a rural childhood to the sudden intensity of the White House, from the grief of unthinkable loss to the cautious optimism of a country entering a new age, from the silence that defined me to the decisions that defined a presidency. You will walk with me through the triumphs and the uncertainties, through the debates and the quiet reflections, Through the years when America was growing, roaring, and reinventing itself at a pace unseen before, settle in, take a deep breath, and allow my voice to carry you across the decades. This is my life as I lived it, steady, thoughtful, at times heavy, and at other times filled with hope. And now, let us begin the story of how I became the 30th President of the United States, and how a quiet man came to lead a nation finding its place in a rapidly changing world. As the world around me grew louder, I found that the habits formed in my early years never left me. I carried the discipline of silence, the habit of careful listening, into every room I stepped into. In Massachusetts, where my political life began to take shape, I discovered that speaking less did not mean knowing less. It meant choosing my words with purpose. It meant waiting until the noise settled, so that I could see the path more clearly than those who rushed ahead. When I first entered public office, I had no grand ambition to climb higher. I simply believed that local government mattered, that the concerns of ordinary people deserved attention and fairness. I walked the streets of Northampton, spoke with shopkeepers, factory workers, families trying to build better lives. They were not asking for miracles. They wanted stability, honesty, and a government that would not interfere with their hard work. These early conversations shaped the principles that would define my service: thrift, responsibility, and trust in the American individual. That I remember the days when my public duties were modest, when the future still seemed to stretch out quietly before me. Yet every decision, no matter how small, whether signing a local ordinance or settling a town dispute, honed my sense of judgment. Being mayor, then a legislator, then lieutenant governor and governor, I learned that leadership is not always found in dramatic speeches or sweeping reforms. Sometimes it is found in restraint. Sometimes it is found in letting people govern themselves without unnecessary intrusion. The world, however, was changing rapidly. New industries were rising. Cities were swelling with workers seeking opportunity. Automobiles clattered across streets that once knew only horse-drawn wagons. The rhythms of life were speeding up, and with them came a restless energy that swept across the nation. It was in these years that people began to look for leaders who understood the balance between progress and stability. And though I rarely sought attention, I found myself being carried forward by events that would soon reshape my destiny. One of the moments that pushed me into the national spotlight was a labor crisis, a confrontation between workers and the police in Boston. Tensions were high. Fear spread through the city. Chaos loomed. Many wondered what course the government would take. For me, the answer was simple, rooted in the principles I had always known. Authority must be upheld, order must be maintained, and the rights of the public, those who depended on safety and security, could not be abandoned. My response was firm, and for many, unexpectedly so. In an age where public disorder was becoming more common, my words struck a deep chord across the nation. For the first time, Americans who had never heard my name began to take notice. Newspapers printed my statements. Commentators praised or condemned my stance. But what mattered to me was that the people of Massachusetts understood that their government would not falter. That moment, though I did not fully grasp it at the time, set the stage for everything that was to come. Life has a quiet way of guiding us toward responsibilities we never imagined. As I continued my work in Massachusetts, I felt the weight of public trust grow heavier. I also felt the limits of words. Sometimes silence between moments of decision carries its own meaning. Yet even as I served, I still thought of myself as a simple man from Vermont, someone shaped more by the hills and farms of my youth than by the marble chambers of government. Then came the call to national service. I was asked to join the presidential ticket as vice president, a role that many underestimated, yet one that carried immense potential for sudden change. I accepted, knowing that life often leads us where we are needed, not where we expect. The campaign was swift, the speeches brief, and before long, I found myself preparing to serve under President Warren G. Harding during a time when the nation sought recovery, calm, and reassurance. I did not know that fate would place a far heavier burden on me sooner than anyone anticipated. I did not know that one quiet night, in the dim glow of a lamp in my family home, the world would shift in a way that would test every part of who I was. But those moments were still ahead of me. For now, the future remained a distant horizon, and I carried with me the lessons of my upbringing, the humility of my early service, and the belief that even a quiet man could contribute to the steady course of the nation. The years serving as vice president under President Harding were, in many ways, quietly instructive. I observed the workings of the federal government with careful attention, learning not only the mechanics of policy and legislation, but also the subtle ways in which public expectation and private administration intersect. Much of what I did went unnoticed by the public, yet I found value in it. I saw the importance of steady hands guiding complicated matters, and I learned that discretion often speaks louder than rhetoric. I did not seek headlines, and I rarely spoke at length in public. My temperament, already shaped by years of Vermont reserve, seemed at odds with the bustling political culture of Washington. Yet I found that silence could be a strength. By listening, observing, and weighing my options before acting, I was able to navigate the complex machinery of government without distraction. I understood that leadership did not always require grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It required judgment, consistency, and an understanding of responsibility that could not be hurried. Then came that August night in 1923, the night that changed everything. I had returned home, seeking the calm of Vermont, when a knock at the door roused me from the quiet of my evening. The news was brief, almost understated. President Harding had died suddenly. The weight of the presidency, unanticipated and immense, had fallen upon my shoulders. I remember the stillness of that moment, the hush of the room, the way the shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual across the wooden floor. There was no time for panic, no room for hesitation. The nation would need steadiness, and I knew that steadiness had to begin with me. My father, a man of firm hands and calm judgment, administered the oath of office. He placed his hand upon mine, and I repeated the words that would transform my life forever. There was no applause, no ceremonial flourish, just the solemn acknowledgement of duty. In that moment, the quiet life I had known in Vermont was replaced by the ceaseless demands of the presidency. The streets were silent outside, but the responsibility inside weighed louder than any crowd or proclamation could. Assuming the presidency in such sudden circumstances was sobering. I had anticipated a life of incremental service, guided by careful steps. Instead, I was thrust into a position where every decision mattered, where the eyes of the nation were upon me, and where mistakes could not easily be undone. And yet, I knew that the values instilled in me from childhood, discipline, prudence, and a commitment to duty, were more important than ever. They would guide my actions as the world watched. The first days were a delicate balance between continuity and action. I maintained the existing administration's policies where they served the country well. Yet I approached each decision with the meticulous attention I had learned over years of local and state governance. Crisis after crisis, problem after problem, I found that my quiet, deliberate style often calmed those around me. Cabinet members, aides, and even the public seemed reassured not by grand statements, but by consistency, clarity, and the careful exercise of authority that I in Washington. One quickly learns that tragedy and grief are never far from power. I had endured personal losses before, the deaths of family members in my youth, but nothing prepared me for the knowledge that the burden of the nation's trust rested entirely upon my shoulders. Every choice carried weight, every moment demanded attention. And yet, even amid these pressures, I found time to reflect on the lessons of my upbringing, that a steady hand, a thoughtful mind, and a disciplined approach often accomplish more than bold declarations or restless energy. Life in the White House was not a spectacle, at least not to me. I did not seek it as a stage. I treated each day as a series of responsibilities, briefings, meetings, decisions on policy and law. Yet, as the months passed, the country began to notice the results of calm, deliberate governance. Economic confidence, measured responses to international concerns, and steady administration of domestic matters became hallmarks of my leadership. I realized that even in a world enamored with drama, there was room for quiet strength. Amid these duties, personal grief struck deeply. The loss of my son left a mark I could not erase, and the solitude of such sorrow was profound. Yet, I understood that life, and the office I now held, demanded that I continue. My private grief had to coexist with public responsibility. I learned to carry it silently, to let it inform my empathy and judgment without overwhelming the duties at hand. Through these years, I came to see that my greatest strength lay not in eloquence, but in reflection. I observed the nation, listened to the voices of citizens, and guided the machinery of government with care. I came to believe deeply that government should serve as a framework of order and stability, supporting the people rather than dictating their lives. Every policy I endorsed, every law I signed, was measured against that principle: to foster prosperity while preserving liberty, and to exercise power with restraint rather than excess. Even as the nation prospered, I remained conscious of the quiet struggles that existed alongside this apparent abundance. Cities were growing rapidly, factories were humming with activity, and new inventions promised convenience and efficiency, yet many Americans still faced uncertainty. I often reminded myself that leadership is measured not by applause, but by the capacity to act in ways that safeguard stability while encouraging growth. The challenges were subtle: managing economic expansion without inflation, encouraging investment without speculation, ensuring that the rights of individuals were protected even as society changed rapidly. At home, I sought to maintain the same principles of simplicity and restraint that had guided me throughout my life. My family, my wife Grace, and our children provided a grounding that was essential amid the demands of the presidency. Even in the grand halls of the White House, I preferred quiet meals, private conversations, and the consistent routine that gave life a sense of order. It was in these small moments, reading letters, listening to my children, walking the grounds in the early morning, that I felt most connected to the values that shaped me: discipline, responsibility, and thoughtfulness. That I often reflected on the contrast between the public spectacle of politics and the private, enduring work of governance. Policies, budgets, and decisions might never excite headlines, but their effects would ripple through the lives of citizens for years. I approached every measure with careful attention, mindful that prosperity without prudence is fleeting, and that liberty without structure is fragile. Even in the midst of national optimism, I insisted on moderation, avoiding the temptations of extravagance that too often accompany success. The social landscape of the 1920s was shifting as well. New cultural movements, technological advances, and changing attitudes challenged traditional norms. I did not seek to dictate personal choices or impose my own tastes. Rather, I observed, understood, and weighed the potential consequences for the broader society. A president, I believed, should provide stability while leaving the vitality of culture, innovation, and individuality to the people. My role was to create an environment where Americans could thrive, not to orchestrate every aspect of their lives. Internationally, I was aware of the delicate position of the United States. The world had been scarred by war, and the lessons of conflict demanded careful attention to diplomacy, trade, and military readiness. I believed that the nation's strength lay in prudence, integrity, and the ability to act decisively when necessary, without succumbing to unnecessary provocation or adventure. Quiet leadership, I found, often yields results that are more enduring than rhetoric or spectacle. Even as I carried the weight of these responsibilities, I remained committed to the simplicity and honesty that had defined my early years. I avoided excess, rejected ostentation, and focused on doing what was right rather than what was popular. My advisors sometimes urged more flamboyant displays, believing they would inspire confidence or attract attention, but I trusted in steadiness, consistency, and the quiet demonstration of competence. History, I thought, would judge results, not appearances. Through all of this, I came to understand that silence is not absence. Silence allows reflection, measured judgment, and the ability to act with clarity. It is in quiet deliberation that one sees the implications of decisions before they are made. And while the world outside may rush, argue, and demand constant spectacle, I learned that patience, restraint, and careful observation often achieve outcomes that are more profound and enduring than any speech or public display. My life, in that era, became a careful balance between action and reflection, between public duty and private grounding. I carried the lessons of my Vermont upbringing into every corner of the White House, applying the same principles that had guided me through childhood, through law, through local and state government: honesty, restraint, prudence, and a deep respect for the responsibilities entrusted to me. The 1920s were an age of innovation, wealth, and change, yet I strove to lead in a way that was steady, predictable, and aligned with enduring principles rather than transient excitement. One of the first things I recognized as president was the importance of fiscal responsibility. The country had endured war, inflation, and rapid change, and I believed that government should reflect the same prudence I had learned in Vermont. Live within your means, plan carefully, and avoid excess. Working closely with Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon, we pursued policies that aimed to reduce the national debt while fostering an environment where business and industry could grow responsibly. It was not about grand gestures or flashy announcements. It was about steady, deliberate action that would benefit the nation for years to come. That I understood that prosperity cannot be forced. It is nurtured through confidence, stability, and the careful balancing of risk and reward. Taxes were adjusted, budgets scrutinized, and waste reduced wherever possible. I believe that when citizens saw their government managing resources wisely, they would have confidence not only in the state, but in themselves. This principle guided every decision. A government should provide order, not excess. It should enable, not hinder. It should respect the effort of every individual who contributed to the nation's growth. The 1920s were, for many, a time of excitement and transformation. Cities grew, industries thrived, and new technologies reshaped daily life. Automobiles became common, radios brought distant events into living rooms, and electricity spread to more homes. Yet in the midst of this rapid progress, I believe that the government's role was to guide carefully, to ensure that growth was sustainable and that the liberties of ordinary citizens were never sacrificed for the sake of fleeting trends or political spectacle. That I did not seek the limelight, nor did I feel the need to embellish events with rhetoric. My focus was on results. I met with business leaders, labor representatives, and economists, listening more than I spoke, evaluating the long-term impact of policies rather than the short-term applause they might generate. The country, I realized, responded not to extravagance but to reliability. People valued a government that could be trusted to act responsibly, even if it acted quietly. During this period, I often reflected on the lessons of my youth. In Vermont, we understood that every action had consequences. A mismanaged farm, a neglected account, a careless word, each brought its own cost. The same principle applied to the nation. Government could not ignore prudence, because the cost would be felt by all. Every decision about taxation, spending, or regulation had real-world implications for families, businesses, and communities. I approached these matters with the careful attention they deserved. That I also recognized the delicate balance between progress and tradition. America was moving forward faster than ever before, yet the values that had sustained the nation, hard work, honesty, personal responsibility, and civic virtue, remained essential. My role, as I saw it, was to ensure that growth did not come at the expense of these enduring principles. I believe that a country could advance materially while remaining grounded morally and socially, but only if those in government acted with integrity, caution, and humility. Even amid prosperity, I never lost sight of the human element. Economic statistics and policy measures are important, but they are meaningless without the people who live under their effects. I listened to farmers concerned about markets, workers worried about wages, families seeking security. I believe that government should create the conditions for opportunity while leaving the initiative and effort to its citizens. The role of a president, I thought, was to provide a framework within which the country could flourish, not to dictate how every citizen should live their life. In these years, the country came to see that calm, steady leadership could coexist with national growth and innovation. My approach was often understated, even invisible to those accustomed to more flamboyant displays of authority. Yet in retrospect, it was the restraint, the quiet deliberation, and the consistency that reassured a nation experiencing rapid transformation. People may have called me silent, but in truth, every action, every decision, every signature on legislation was deliberate, purposeful, and grounded in the belief that government exists to serve the people, not to impress them. As the decade advanced toward its peak, I watched the nation grow in ways both thrilling and unsettling. Factories churned out automobiles, radios, and household appliances at unprecedented speeds. Cities expanded, skyscrapers climbed higher, and Americans increasingly embraced the conveniences and freedoms that modern industry provided. Yet I remained conscious of the balance that must accompany such growth. Prosperity without prudence can be fleeting, and wealth without responsibility can leave a nation vulnerable. I carried this conviction into every decision I made, from budgets to appointments, always mindful that the trust of the people is both fragile and enduring. Domestic policy, to me, was a delicate exercise in restraint. I encouraged tax reductions that allowed citizens to retain more of their earnings while still maintaining the integrity of the federal budget. I prioritized reducing the national debt and controlling spending, believing that the example set by the government itself would reinforce the values of thrift and responsibility among the people. I never sought grandiose programs or flamboyant displays, for I believe that stability and reliability matter far more to a nation's prosperity than temporary spectacle. Quiet, consistent governance was my creed, and it guided every action I took. At the same time, social change pressed forward. New forms of entertainment, consumer culture, and urbanization altered the rhythms of daily life. I did not oppose these changes. I recognized their inevitability and potential. My role was not to dictate culture, but to ensure that the framework of society remained sound, that laws were just, that liberties were protected, and that innovation did not erode the foundations upon which the nation thrived. In every policy and every decision, I sought to maintain this delicate balance, progress guided by principle, advancement tempered by prudence. The White House remained a place of quiet order, even as the nation buzzed around it. Grace and I cherished the simplicity and intimacy of family life, shielding our home from unnecessary attention while nurturing the bonds that sustained us. In the mornings, I would rise early, read correspondence, review briefings, and take long walks, reflecting on both the immediate responsibilities and the long-term consequences of governance. The presence of family, of routine, of quiet reflection was essential to preserving the clarity and judgment that the presidency demanded. Without such grounding, even the most disciplined mind can be swayed by the currents of public opinion or the distractions of fame. That I often thought about the paradox of leadership, that one must act decisively while remaining measured, guide without overreaching, and protect liberty while maintaining order. These lessons, learned in the hills of Vermont and honed through years of local and state government, proved invaluable. I realized that leadership is less about commanding attention than it is about ensuring that government functions smoothly, fairly, and efficiently. It is about creating conditions under which the people can flourish without unnecessary interference. Economic policy, in particular, demanded careful judgment. Encouraging business growth while maintaining financial stability required constant vigilance. I worked closely with Secretary Mellon to ensure that tax policies, banking regulations, and budgetary measures promoted confidence without encouraging speculation. Prosperity, I believed, should be sustainable and accessible, not fleeting or concentrated. The people's trust in their government depends not only on immediate results, but on the perception that those in office act responsibly, guided by principle rather than impulse. Through these years, I also reflected deeply on the relationship between public duty and private life. Grief had visited our family, reminding me that even the highest office cannot shield one from human sorrow. Yet I learned to carry such burdens quietly, letting them inform my empathy and judgment without diminishing the clarity required to serve the nation. Solitude, reflection, and the presence of family became essential companions in the exercise of leadership. In silence, I found the strength to navigate crises, the patience to weigh decisions, and the perspective to see the broader implications of each action. Looking back, I understand now that my approach, steady, restrained, deliberate, was not always understood by contemporaries. Some criticized my quiet demeanor, mistaking restraint for indecision, silence for disengagement. Yet the results spoke for themselves: a nation that prospered, a government that maintained order, and citizens who could rely on consistency and integrity at the highest levels of authority. Leadership is often misunderstood, I realized, because it is less about the performance and more about the effect. Even amid the social, technological, and economic transformation of the 1920s, I remained committed to the principles that had guided me from childhood: honesty, responsibility, prudence, and a deep respect for the people I served. I believed that government's power must always be tempered by restraint, that the true measure of success is not in applause, but in the quiet assurance that the nation's affairs are in capable hands. And as I observed the changes sweeping the country, the bright lights of cities, the hum of industry, the shifting patterns of daily life, I held fast to the belief that calm, deliberate leadership provides the foundation upon which prosperity, liberty, and social cohesion endure. The latter part of the decade brought both triumphs and quiet sorrows. The economy seemed unstoppable, with factories producing more goods than ever, banks expanding their reach, and Americans embracing new conveniences and technologies that promised a brighter, more efficient life. Cities buzzed with activity, streets filled with automobiles, and radios carried voices and music across great distances, shrinking the vastness of the nation into a shared experience. It was a time of optimism, yet I never allowed myself to be carried away by the excitement. Prosperity, I believed, must always be balanced with responsibility. Excess, even in good times, can become the seed of regret that I continued to emphasize fiscal prudence in every decision, reducing waste wherever possible and encouraging policies that strengthened both government and citizen confidence. Taxes were adjusted thoughtfully, budgets scrutinized, and every expenditure measured against necessity. I felt that the most enduring form of leadership is not flashy legislation or public spectacle, but the quiet, meticulous care of resources entrusted to you by the people. That principle had guided me since childhood, and it remained my compass even amid the fast pace of national progress. Yet even as the nation flourished, my personal life was shadowed by grief. My beloved son had died, leaving a space that could not be filled, and the loss weighed heavily upon me and my wife, Grace. The White House, with all its splendor, offered no comfort from such sorrow. But I found that even in the midst of grief, duty continued unabated. The nation did not pause for my personal pain. Its needs were ongoing. I learned to carry sorrow silently, letting it deepen my empathy without diminishing my commitment to responsibility. That silence became part of my strength, allowing me to act decisively even when the heart struggled in quiet. That I often reflected on the paradox of leadership, how to balance private emotion with public duty, how to bear personal grief while embodying the confidence and steadiness expected by millions. I realized that a president is never simply a man. He is a symbol, a custodian of stability, and a channel through which the nation measures itself. Every action, every word, or absence of words, was scrutinized. And yet, I found that by maintaining composure, restraint, and clarity of purpose, one could guide a country more effectively than by trying to project constant energy or emotion. That I, in these years, I also reflected deeply on the nature of government itself. I believed firmly that its role is to enable, not to dominate, to support, not to intrude, to create conditions in which citizens can thrive, rather than dictate the course of their lives. I admired the inventiveness and ambition of the American people and understood that my task was to create the framework within which such initiative could succeed. Policies, budgets, and oversight are tools, but the spirit of the nation lies in the character, creativity, and effort of its people. The 1920s also tested the limits of restraint. Social changes, technological advances, and shifting cultural attitudes created friction between tradition and innovation. I did not oppose change, but I approached it with care. Legislation and executive action must serve lasting purpose, not temporary excitement. I considered every measure carefully, its consequences, its necessity, its fairness. Leadership, I believed, is not in commanding what is novel, but in guiding what is enduring. Even amid a bustling White House, I held fast to the habits of my youth: early mornings, quiet reflection, careful reading, and measured conversation. I did not seek applause, nor did I crave recognition. Instead, I sought understanding and clarity, knowing that a calm mind leads to sound decisions. In the solitude of early mornings, walking the grounds of the White House, I considered not only immediate concerns, but the long-term welfare of the nation. I thought of Vermont, of my father, of the lessons learned on quiet farm paths, and in the simple rhythms of daily work. Those lessons, small and seemingly mundane at the time, proved invaluable in guiding the country through both prosperity and unforeseen challenges. Through these years, I realized that leadership is less about words than it is about presence and consistency. One's character, reflected in decisions, actions, and restraint, often speaks more loudly than speeches or declarations. Silence is not absence. It is reflection, foresight, and preparation. And in guiding a nation, it is this quiet, deliberate strength that endures long after the applause fades. When my term came to an end, I returned to Northampton, to the familiar quiet of Massachusetts, grateful for the chance to step away from the constant scrutiny of the presidency. Public life had been both a privilege and a profound responsibility, yet I longed for the simplicity that had defined my youth, the steady rhythm of daily life, the comfort of family, and the freedom to reflect without interruption. Retirement, for me, was not an end but a continuation of the values I had held throughout my life: discipline, reflection, and the measured application of judgment. In those years after leaving office, I observed the nation from a distance, contemplating the enduring lessons of governance and human nature. I watched as the country navigated economic booms and challenges, social transformations, and cultural revolutions. From afar, I could see that the principles I had tried to uphold, prudence, restraint, and respect for individual liberty, remained as vital as ever. Leadership, I realized, is not confined to the walls of the White House. It echoes through the actions of citizens, the institutions they build, and the integrity with which public servants carry out their duties. That I reflected often on the lessons of my own life: the quiet discipline of youth, the importance of careful observation, the value of integrity, and the necessity of balancing public responsibility with private reflection. Each decision, each moment of restraint, each careful judgment had been a thread in the fabric of a presidency built not on spectacle but on steadiness. I understood that true leadership is measured not by the volume of one's voice, but by the weight of one's actions and the consistency of one's principles. Family remained central to my life after office. Grace and I cherished the ordinary moments: walks through familiar streets, conversations at home, time spent with friends and neighbors. These moments grounded me, reminding me that while public service is vital, it is the private bonds, the lessons learned in quiet spaces, that shape character and provide perspective. The love and support of family were as essential to the nation's future as any policy enacted in Washington. Without it, even the most disciplined mind risks losing sight of the human purpose behind governance. That I also contemplated the legacy of my presidency. I hoped that my adherence to restraint and prudence would serve as a model for future leaders, that government could be strong yet limited, effective yet unobtrusive, principled yet adaptable. I believe that stability, honesty, and careful judgment are as important as bold initiatives and visionary rhetoric. In guiding the nation through years of prosperity and challenge, I sought to demonstrate that measured, deliberate leadership can achieve results that endure longer than any fleeting display of grandeur. In the quiet of retirement, I often pondered the broader arc of American history. The nation, like its people, is shaped by both triumph and hardship, by innovation and tradition, by individual effort and collective responsibility. I understood that my role was but one chapter in this unfolding story, and yet I took solace in knowing that even quiet service, grounded in principle, can leave a lasting mark. Leadership, after all, is not about fame or recognition. It is about fulfilling duty with integrity, guiding wisely, and allowing the country to thrive through thoughtful governance. I reflect upon my life from its earliest days in Vermont to the highest office in the land. I see a consistent thread: the value of quiet observation, the necessity of deliberate judgment, and the enduring importance of principle over popularity. I sought always to serve the nation with honesty and restraint, to uphold the trust placed in me by the people, and to preserve the freedom and opportunity that define the American experience. The presidency was not a stage for my own ambition, but a responsibility entrusted to me, and I carried it with solemn care, guided always by the lessons of my upbringing and the enduring conviction that public service is, at its best, an exercise in humility and discipline. In the end, I hope that history remembers not the silence for which I was sometimes known, but the steadiness, the prudence, and the commitment to principle that guided my actions. I hope it sees that a quiet man, guided by discipline and reflection, can lead a nation effectively, even in times of rapid change and uncertainty. My life, from humble beginnings to the presidency and back to private reflection, stands as a testament to the power of restraint, the value of integrity, and the enduring truth that leadership is measured not in applause, but in the trust one earns and preserves, quietly, faithfully, and without fanfare. As the latter part of my presidency unfolded, I remained attentive to the subtleties of governance. The country was thriving economically, yet prosperity brings its own challenges. Speculation, overconfidence, and the rapid expansion of credit created undercurrents that demanded careful oversight. I did not believe in overreaching regulation, but I believed in vigilance, in monitoring trends, and in guiding policy with prudence and foresight. Leadership, after all, is measured not only in the management of calm times, but in the ability to prevent disorder before it arises. During this period, I often reflected on the interplay between culture and governance. The 1920s brought jazz, cinema, radio, and new forms of expression that reshaped daily life. I did not seek to control cultural movements, nor did I attempt to impose personal tastes on the nation. My role was to provide a framework in which these innovations could flourish safely, ensuring that the liberties and rights of citizens were respected even amid rapid transformation. I found satisfaction in knowing that the government could maintain order without stifling creativity, and that progress need not come at the cost of principle. The responsibilities of the presidency were constant, yet I approached each day with deliberate routine. Mornings were for reflection and correspondence, afternoons for meetings, decisions, and the review of legislation, evenings for family, study, and contemplation. This rhythm grounded me, reminding me that even in the most exalted office, it is the quiet, consistent application of judgment that ensures stability. I often walked the grounds of the White House alone, considering the long-term implications of decisions, aware that the effects of policy extend far beyond the moment of enactment. That I also became increasingly aware of the importance of public perception, though I did not court it. A calm, measured approach inspired confidence far more than flamboyance or rhetoric. Citizens do not rely on the grandeur of speech alone. They rely on the consistency, integrity, and competence of their leaders. I trusted that steady action, thoughtful policy, and personal restraint would foster respect and maintain the trust of the people more effectively than any display of charisma or spectacle. Even amid national prosperity, I did not forget the hardships that persisted in pockets of the country. Farmers facing uncertain markets, workers confronting labor challenges, families navigating the complexities of modern life. All reminded me that leadership is not only about the grand picture, but about attending to the details that affect real people. Each policy, each decision, was weighed not solely for its economic effect, but for its impact on the lives of citizens. I sought to ensure that government actions reinforced opportunity and fairness, and that the benefits of prosperity were broadly shared without unnecessary interference in private initiative. Reflecting on my personal philosophy, I realized that my greatest strength as president lay not in speech or charisma, but in consistency, restraint, and integrity. I had learned from early life in Vermont that discipline, humility, and careful observation are more reliable than impulsive action. I believe that government should serve as a stabilizing force, a framework of order that allows the people to exercise their freedom responsibly. In every decision, from budgeting to appointments, from domestic policy to international affairs, I sought to uphold these enduring principles. Family remained a cornerstone of my life and perspective. Grace, our children, and the quiet moments we shared provided not only comfort but clarity. Even in the most challenging periods, the presence of loved ones reminded me that governance exists to protect and enable life, not to overshadow it. My grief, my joys, my reflections, all became integrated into my understanding of duty. Leadership, I realized, is not a performance to be admired but a responsibility to be fulfilled, measured by its results rather than its spectacled. As I look back on those years, I understand now that my approach, reserved, deliberate, and steadfast, was suited to a nation in transition. The 1920s were a period of remarkable growth, technological advancement, and cultural change. Yet it was the quiet, consistent application of judgment, the careful attention to both principle and practice, that provided the foundation for enduring stability. My presidency, while often understated, demonstrated that calm, reflective leadership can guide a nation effectively, even in times of rapid change. In the end, my hope was simple: that America would continue to prosper, that its citizens would enjoy both liberty and opportunity, and that government would remain a servant to the people rather than a master over them. I believe deeply that restraint, prudence, and integrity are not merely personal virtues, but the essential qualities of effective governance. And so I governed quietly, steadily, and with the conviction that the true measure of leadership is the lasting welfare of those you serve, not the fleeting applause of the moment.